I grew up in a little Ozzie and Harriet kind of neighborhood down in Lumberton, North Carolina. It was a town of about 16,000 people, tobacco town. My father was originally a photographer, one of the news services. He was out of El Paso, Texas, and he traveled all over the United States. He wound up on some kind of assignment in Lumberton, and he met my mother, who was working in a store there, and it was love at first sight, as I've been told, and he wound up setting up a photographic studio in Lumberton. At the time, he was the only photographer in town, and I can remember when he would be asked to go out and do photography for insurance purposes. There were hurricanes, of course, down in Lumberton, and they would want to send somebody up to photograph the damage to assess what needed to be done insurance-wise and everything. And I never went up with him, obviously, but he told me the story of going up in these little tiny single-engine planes. They would take the door off the plane, and someone would literally hold him around the waist as he kind of leaned out of the plane with his big 4x5 Crown graphic, and he would shoot these pictures of hurricane damaged crops and everything. And he would come back. This is before OSHA and all of those other agencies. But he did a bit of everything. I don't know if my dad was really a creative photographer in the sense that he visioned composition. He had an innate sense of what was needed in the picture, and it wasn't so much the rule of thirds or make sure you don't have this in the composition, or you don't want to have blown out highlights, and, as we often think of when we're photographing today. It was more of a kind of a utilitarian approach to it. I need to get this picture. It needs to tell a story. And he told some great stories, and maybe he wasn't aware that he was a great storyteller, which in turn made them great pictures. When I was growing up, photography was just something that my dad did, and I helped out. I didn't think about it in terms of a career. I was a musician. I started playing the trumpet when I was in the second grade, and then I started playing the piano. In high school, I played in the band. I was accepted at East Carolina College, which is now East Carolina University, as a piano student. I had been going there during summers, studying with one of the professors there, Robert Carter. And I also was strongly influenced by some musicians who were in town. I had the privilege of, at the age of 16, being in a dance band, if you will, playing the standards of the day, the Benny Goodman, whatever, all of these great tunes, and I would travel with them on weekends to these country clubs, and we would go to Fort Bragg, which is where the Army base was. We would play at the Officers Club of the 82nd Airborne Division, and it was great for a 16-year-old. I think I'd make $15 a gig, which was, that was 1958, 59. That was pretty nice. And it happened that one of the fellows in the band had been to the Naval School of Music a few years before, and he had served for 4 years as a naval musician. And he had been out in Hawaii. And I remember he talked to me about how wonderful the experience was for him, and just started getting me to think, ooh, maybe there's some alternatives to going to college and majoring in piano, because I've always been very curious about the world, and it just sounded like this could be an opportunity to see something that I might never see again. When I approach people that I feel might be subjects for my photographs, I always try to do it with a tremendous amount of humility, in a way that I'm not imposing myself upon them, but I'm offering something that I feel is beautiful, and I want to share that with them. Carry your camera everywhere. because you can't know when the photograph is going to appear. You need to always have your camera. And some people say, well, you're going to get lucky. Well, luck also is something that you have to prepare for. There's a chance that I'm going to be walking around Northampton and all of a sudden, President Obama is going to come hang gliding down into the center of the park that's to my right, and I'm going to be there to photograph it, or something absolutely absurd. And many times it's a matter of being at the right place at the right time. I still do an occasional portrait shoot here in this studio, and that's usually for people who are looking for a portfolio, whether they're actors or models or whatever. And there is an enjoyment in that, and I've got it pretty much down as far as simple one light setups that give the desired results. But I thought about this whole issue since I've been thinking about that since I've been going out and listening to stories and photographing people just by accident that I might meet. And there's some enjoyment about going out and hearing the stories that I don't remember experiencing as much when I was in the studio. And I find myself not soliciting studio work anymore, to the point where I'm getting great satisfaction just in being in touch with people on this kind of visceral story in front of you, listening, emotionally connected in a way that I wasn't getting necessarily when I was in the studio. I think all photographers have a desire to share their work. May say that, well, I'm happy just in my computer or in my dark room or on my walls. But I think we all have a desire to share our work. And this is a whole different kind of project. And the idea just suddenly came to us, why don't we do something locally? Real people who live here in Westfield who have gone on this journey, if you will, and have come to this country. So we started talking, and Bob's idea was to identify as many different countries as we could for the show. So we wound up going around identifying specifically people who had businesses here, because we wanted to show that people came to Westfield, they prospered, and they contributed to the community. So we wound up doing that with, I believe it was about 10 or 12 different individuals. It's always interesting when you're doing a project like this because people don't know you. They don't know Bill Hughes necessarily. Who is this guy? He's asking to photograph, just relax, blah, blah, blah. And it was important, as I've told people before, just to sit down and gain the potential subject's trust. Recently I've been working in color, but that's just because of the specific project I was doing. Personally, when I'm doing my own work, I tend to gravitate toward black and white. Color has the ability to create and emphasize the vibrancy of a scene, the color. Black and white seems to emphasize more the contrast, the geometrics of it, the light, the lines. One of the things I found when I'm photographing people, specifically portraits, is that when I do portraits in black and white, I sense that I'm getting their soul, their inner being, in a way that I can't quite get to when I'm shooting in color. When I have the camera around my neck, it seems to give me a certain freedom, a license, if you will, to move into worlds that I've never been in. It's kind of like having a key, and I open this door, and suddenly this vast new world just presents itself, and that's one of the things that excites me about photography, when that door is opened and suddenly there's wonderment everywhere. The late 80s, I started hanging around the north end of Springfield on my lunch breaks. I was working for a company. As I moved around in the north end of Springfield, I found that there were some interesting places to visit. It was predominantly a Puerto Rican neighborhood, and a couple of days later I said, let me grab a camera and I'm going to go back and I'm going to photograph in that neighborhood. So one thing led to another, and then voila, I became a regular person to habitat the wonderful streets of the north end of Springfield. I also try to put myself in interesting situations that are going to lend themselves to finding subjects. There's a great photographer by the name of Larry Fink who passed away a year or so ago, and he often told his students, you have to take chances to find and get chances. When I go out and shoot, I am drawn to things that visually interest me. Maybe I see emotions in a group of people. There's an interesting light that is coming down from one side or the other, and I see certain arrangements that appeal to me, but I don't overanalyze and think in the moment about those kinds of things. It's really back to being an instinctual thing that happens just in a split second. Well, as I've entered my octogenarian decade, I find that my life, the tempo of my life, is slowing down a bit. I often relate it to musical terms. I used to walk at a speed which in music would be equivalent to andante, which is a moderate speed, to allegro, which is fast. I don't do that anymore. I walk at more of a largo speed, which is much, much slower. The fact of the matter is, there are wonderful benefits that occur when one slows up one's life. I look around in a different way. I take more time to contemplate the wonderful activities that are around me in a way that's more reflective, more meditative, if you will. And it's been a wonderful blessing to have this happen to me. It hasn't been a hardship. It's been a wonderful new way of seeing life and being thrilled and being enchanted by all the beautiful stuff that's around me.